the problem is that a lot of successful people do not share their journey. They don't share what they went through. And this reminds me of this because I wrote a blog post about this, meeting Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, and he's got a podcast as well. A lot of you have heard of him. I think he's on the Discovery Channel. But I ran into him in Manhattan at a bar one night, and I went up to him and talked to him, and I just said, hey, man, I'm starting a podcast. I love your podcast. I'm looking up to people like you as role models for me, and I just kind of want to fast track my success as much as I can, to the extent that I can, by learning from other people and mistakes that they've made. And he said something that really hit me. He said, oh, mistakes. We've had many. And that hit me. And I'm thinking to myself, here's Mike Rowe. He's got tons of followers and fans and huge success. But I never thought about what it took for him to get there. And so after that, he shared some of the stuff that he went through and the mistakes that they made and the roadblocks that they had.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Mike C-Roc, who is creating the What Are You Made Of movement. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from a book I read recently called Beyond Wealth. According to Dr. Stanley, aspirationals, people who act rich and want to be rich, but aren't really rich. Many are good people, well-educated, and perhaps earning a 6-figure income, but they aren't balance sheet rich because it's almost impossible for most workers, even those who are well-paid, to hyperspend on consumer goods and save a lot of money. And saving is the key prerequisite for investing. The reality is, it doesn't matter how much you make if you can't hold on to it and build up your balance sheet, which is where the compound effect occurs. It's about changing the way we look at the world. The key to life is finding the key that unlocks yourself. We can't control anything but our reactions and desires. When we unlock ourselves, we have the potential and the ability to live life on our terms. It doesn't mean we won't have bad things happen to us. They absolutely will. It's how we respond, and that's entirely in our control. The simple principle unlocks us, and yet we struggle so much with finding the key and using it to our advantage. Today's guest is Mike C-Roc, who's building a mortgage business based on culture that allows everyone who works there to succeed. He's inspiring people to ask the question, what are you made of? Mike is a motivator, facilitator, dynamic public speaker, and a fierce friend and coach. At his core, he's a grinder. Just a guy who had a fire lit in his heart at an early age. That fire has led him to inspire others to see the greatness inside of themselves, using past life events to fuel their fire. His passion is truly helping others, whether it's his employees, partners, real estate agents, or anyone else looking to better their business, personal life, or mental game. C-Roc is always up for the challenge. He has spoken in front of thousands of real estate agents, showing them how to grow their business. He dives deep into their past during these talks to show them how you can feed off of good and bad experiences. His forthcoming book is entitled, What Are You Made Of? C-Roc lives in Ocean City, Maryland with his wife Jennifer and their 2 kids, Nicholas and Sophia. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Mike Ciorrocco. It's great to have you join us today.
What's up, Rocky? I'm happy to be here on the Richer Soul podcast with you. Looking forward to it all week, man.
And I'm excited for the conversation. I've been digging into your material, and I'd love for you to share your journey. So we always do that. We start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, first of all, I believe everyone has a story, so I'm glad you asked that question. Everybody has a story. And what I've found recently in talking to some friends of mine that were pretty close, actually, I golf with them, hang out with them, our families go on vacations together, started asking them their story. And I never did that before, but probably about a year ago, I started doing this and upon sharing my story. But when I asked them the question about their story and they start to share, I realized I didn't really even know my friends. So I believe everyone's got a story. This is a mission that I'm on right now. It's called What Are You Made Of? And it all started back, my drive started back at a young age when I was about 11 years old. I come from a broken family, like a lot of your listeners maybe. Never knew my parents together. And at age 8, I broke my mom's heart after being in a situation where I'd go to my dad's every other weekend, like a lot of people, I'm sure. Broke my mom's heart, moved in with my dad, chasing shiny bells and whistles, and a richer family, so to speak. Nicer house. New wife that he had. They were going to take us on vacation. I just bought into it as an 8-year-old kid, probably like most 8-year-old kids would. And 3 years later, I dealt with so much mental abuse and just crazy, crazy environment. Wasn't conducive for a kid to grow up in a happy household. So I told my mom, I said, I got to get out of here. I didn't know what the word culture was at that time, but I just knew that it wasn't a good environment to be in. And so she filed court papers. My dad got them one day. I came home from school. I walked on eggshells as it was in that household. And by the way, I'm not saying any of this to put my dad down by any means. I love him to death. I don't talk to him anymore, not by my choice. But my dad was my hero, Rocky. He had a masonry business, did very well, but he always had this wad of $100 bills in his pocket. And I always looked up to him for that. It wasn't about greed or anything like that or just cash. It was about what that money got us as a family. And I valued that as a kid. Maybe got that from my dad. And my dad saved money a lot. He always saved and was very, very frugal, but he would spend on certain things like vacations and things, but he was very frugal too. And he taught me that, but it was all about money for him I don't think it's a good way. So anyway, I was 11 years old. He got these court papers. He said, get in your room. I need to talk to you. And I was sitting there, my stomach was turning, and he came in and said, hey, it says here you want to move back with your mom. Do you know your financial situation with your mom? She's not that well off. We grew up in the house with my mom's house. It was like a $30,000 house, no air conditioning. We went on vacations to the Jersey Shore, and we were lucky to have vacations, but we'd go and would use black trash bags as suitcases. So she wasn't well off. And he reminded me of that. And he said, are you sure that's what you want? And I said, yeah, I do. This is not a good environment for me. And he said, okay. So he pulled out that wad of $100 bills that he always had, tipped the rubber band off, took one off, $100 bill, crumpled it up and threw it at me and said, here, you're going to need this when you're living on the streets with your mother one day. Now, mind you, I was an 11-year-old kid at that point, and I was crushed. I was devastated that my hero basically had just given up on me. But something also went off in my head, and I don't know how to describe it. I can remember this as clear as day, 31 years ago. I'm 42 now. That was when I was 11. I remember at that moment thinking to myself, I cannot be the only person this has happened to, where their father or someone has given up on them. And I said to myself at that moment, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be on a mission to help other people that have gone through this same thing. And I wasn't going to let that stop me, and I wasn't going to let him win. Now, I don't know if that's a healthy thing or not, to do things just so he doesn't win, but I'm stubborn to a fault. And I think that's driven me in my life, from sports to school to my business, to helping other people. And so with that being said, that was 31 years ago. I've been on a journey since then, and it's been a learning journey the whole way. And I'm not done learning, but I can tell you this, that I want to encourage people to reach back into stories in their lives where they felt like a victim or something happened to them, and start thinking about the fact that they made it through it and it happened for them.
And we all have those. We all have those things that occurred when we were young that create those scripts in our head that prevent us probably from the success that we can possibly have. I was just on a call the other day, and the guy was talking about how when he was a kid, he wanted to learn how to play trumpet. And his teacher said, "Oh, your lips are too big to play trumpet." And the kid never even looked at his lips before that. And from that point on, he's had this hang up about the size of his lips. And it's not even the size of his lips. It's just in that situation, they didn't work out. And I think each and every one of us has those things in our background. I mean, something as small as how your lips look to something as big as you had to deal with, which is probably much, much harder to overcome. But we all do have those stories.
That's a labeling situation there, and that happens often as well. And the problem, Rocky, and I'm so glad you asked this question, but the problem people have is they don't want to share their story. They don't want to revisit them sometimes. They just hold them in. And what I've found is that people don't want to share because they're embarrassed by their story. They don't think it's important enough, or they think that people really won't care, and it will have no effect on people. But they're wrong. They're 100% wrong with that. The messages, the direct messages, the emails and texts that I've gotten since I've started sharing my story is just blows me away. And I can't stress to people enough that you can inspire millions of people with a simple, embarrassing story that you think you have. And even if you inspire one person and change somebody's life, it's worth it.
That is very true. And that's how you bring about change, right? One person at a time. One becomes two, two becomes four, four becomes eight. Compound curve works in every part of life. And here you just see another example of how, that will multiply over time. And the more that we do that, the better it is. I mean, you kind of touched on it, but why do people struggle so much with sharing their story?
Well, I'm going to speak from experience and then just also talking to other people about it. But one thing I noticed, and, I was thinking to myself, it was common for me to have my parents split up, go to my dad's every other weekend or vice versa. Common for me to have my parents fighting or conflict. It was common, right? So I didn't think it was a big deal. So one reason I wouldn't share that before is because I didn't think it's a big deal, and I didn't think that would have an impact on anybody. And, there's people that, I've talked to some people, unfortunately, and it's just terrible, but recently that they were molested by like a sports coach, and they've used that in their life to drive them. And I'm having these guests on my podcast too, because I want them to share their story with people that have gone through similar situations and then show how they've risen from it. So that's from my experience. That's the reason I didn't share it. I just didn't think it was that big a deal. And I'm thinking that the only reason that you'd want to stand on stage or go somewhere and share your story with an audience is if you did something phenomenal, like climb Mount Everest or ran a 4-minute mile or under, those kind of stories that you hear, or save someone's life. But it's quite the contrary. I think that the less of a extraordinary story you have, the more people you impact, because it's an everyday life situation. And that's what people need to understand.
It's funny because I've been on a bunch of other podcasts, and I was on some big ones, and I said, I kind of was like, you have this big podcast, why me? And the conversation back was, people don't want to hear about successful people who are like way at the top. They want to hear about people like them and realize that there's hope for them. And I think that's what you're doing. You're bringing out that level of things, Everest and 4-minute miles. That's all lovely. But what about me, and how do I take the next step in my journey, and how do I get through my struggles? And so I think that's a big part of why that is.
And it's so big for your audience, for example. This is so big in business, entrepreneurship, making money, and in helping people. These things can push you. Like, for example, and then, Michael Jordan didn't make his high school basketball team. I know a lot of you have heard that. The guy that made the team in place of him, Michael Jordan invited him to his Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And he said that the reason that he invited him is because he used that gentleman that beat him out on the high school basketball team as motivation and inspiration, and to keep pushing when things got tough, and even when things went well and they won championships, to go at it again. And that's the whole mind frame. It's so important in business and what we're doing, that I want to get that out there more, because I think a lot of people are just going through the motions sometimes in their business and starting businesses, and they're not using this powerful tool.
And so this has been the conversation that I've been having, and we're looking at from a raising kids standpoint, is if you don't force your kids to struggle, they don't have that fire. And you're essentially robbing them of the ability to do great things if you clear their path too much. We have to have the struggle. Just like as a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, it has to go through the cocoon. It has to go through the struggle of breaking free. If it doesn't, its wings are not strong enough to fly. And so, your story is the fire that created you to have the success that you've had. And we've had many guests on who have very similar types of, that fire moment in their growing up that has allowed them to do that. And I think sometimes life has become a little too easy for many of us. And so we need to find that right balance.
And between you and I and your listeners, I have a 13-year-old son at home, and I'm hard on him. And when we go out in public, people say he's a great kid. Oh man, he's such a great kid. And they go out of their way to say that and all that. And they don't see all the work that goes in at home and the headbutting that happens. And we're both stubborn, but I want to set the agenda for him. And I want to make sure that he understands it. And if it puts him in an uncomfortable situation at home, I'd rather it happen there and he builds from it than outside of the walls of our home.
And I have done very much the same thing. I've pushed my kids to be in uncomfortable situations, and especially, well, I guess boys are much more like different than girls, and fathers and their sons butt heads, and we go through that as well. But we have found a way to have balance in that it's not that they understand that we're sharpening them and making them stronger, and why right. They don't always love it in the moment. They recognize over time the value of having that versus just being handed everything. And that's kind of the conversation in our household. I'm like, you're smart enough to go to college. You're smart enough to pay for it. Don't expect everything to be handed to you. Step up and do the hard work.
100%. That's exactly it. And you got to explain it to the kids as well. I know we're not going on a topic here of raising children, but it does go into what we're talking about here. And sometimes things get heated, and then you just have to calm down and then explain to them why you were, setting the agenda, so to speak.
And the reason that I go back to this is because it's during childhood where all of these traumas, for lack of a better word, happen that cause the issues. I mean, that your whole story starts at 11, right? And right. That period in there. And so people need to realize that that's where these stories are made, and you've got to learn as an adult to let go of your childhood stories too, and to let go of the pain, and then to use that to drive yourself forward. So you're essentially making, I guess it's a movement. And I know you've got a book and a podcast, and you ask the question, what are you made of? Why did you decide on that question?
Very simple answer. I actually used that phrase ever since I was a kid. And we all have a voice in our head, or two voices, a positive and a negative. But I've always had a voice in my head telling me, if I go through something tough or something's not happening the way I want it, I always say that to myself. What are you made of, man? And then some other things I say, hey, you're built for this. I got this. You were made to accomplish this. And I think self-talk inside of our heads, even out verbally, out loud, if you're not around people so they don't think you're crazy, but it works. It is a huge part of my success. And that's where I got that from. What are you made of? And it is a movement. It's going to be a huge movement. I'm going to reach millions with this, Rocky. And I'm happy to be here early part of the journey talking to you about it.
And I'm thrilled that you are here at the early part of the journey talking about it as well. So why do we doubt our abilities? I know you recently wrote a blog post about that.
Yeah. So a lot of times we'll look at other people that are successful. And I wrote a couple blog posts regarding this. One particular topic was more specific to it, about voices in your head telling you, oh, you can't do that, or I'll never get to that level. And then you have an idea, and then you hear another voice in your head that says, yeah, that's not going to happen, or tells you reasons why it's not going to happen. So you have these conflicting things in your head, and the one that's negative has been built longer and trained harder than your positive voice. And that's because people around you in life, family, friends, coworkers, students growing up with, your friends in school, nobody wants, for the most part, people don't want to root for other people or see other people do well, because it reminds them that they're not reaching up to their potential. And so this voice has been inside of your head. It's been trained by other people's voices and limitations for years and years and years. And so that's the main reason that people stop on ideas, don't implement things that they have for their business as fast as possible. And that's another thing. Like, if I get an idea, I implement it right away, even if it's not perfect, because I don't want those voices getting to me to stall me. And if it doesn't work, oh well. But the fact of the matter is, I want to put it into action, because if I don't, those voices and those around me can affect it, and I don't want to give them an opportunity. And so and the other thing is that you have to train the right voice in your head. You have to train it constantly. It is a daily thing, where just like exercising your body, you have to train that voice in your head saying, yes, I can. I got this. It's going to happen. I'm built for this. And that's the difference right there.
And that takes time. I know I'm going through that as well, and I'm constantly making those changes. And we just had a guest on recently, and I chatted with him after the show. I'm like, how do you get from here to there? And he said, don't go from here to there. Go from here to the next step. He said, don't try and be at the top of the mountain in one step, because everyone wants overnight success, right? He's like, just focus on one little improvement and keep doing teeny little improvements. And that is how you will get to the top of the mountain, instead of trying to just overnight your way to the top.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. So we set big, giant, huge, massive goals, big ones. I mean, some of the stuff that I set for myself and my team, when I tell people, they laugh. And then those are the people I can understand that I shouldn't be hanging around, or people that give me negative responses to that. I shouldn't be hanging around those people. And that's something that we take very seriously here. But the thing is that when you set these big goals, it sometimes takes a while to get to them. So what you need to do is set up quick wins. We set up very targets that we can get to our big goal with, and we make them quick so that we can have quick wins to build confidence on and build momentum. And I'm always talking about the snowball effect. Everybody understands the snowball gets bigger the more you roll it in the snow. And so one of the things that we think about sometimes is gravity can stop people. Gravity can pull people down. But a snowball, on the other hand, gravity, when a snowball's on the top of a hill and it's this real snowy mountain and gravity's pulling it, it makes it bigger. And to the point that it just gets out of control. And that's the kind of mind frame that we have in our business. We want to get a snowball rolling with so much momentum that it just gets out of control for the good. And the other thing about that question that you asked me, why people don't reach their potential or why they're limited, one of the things that the problem is that a lot of successful people do not share their journey. They don't share what they went through. And this reminds me of this because I wrote a blog post about this, meeting Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, and he's got a podcast as well. A lot of you have heard of him. He's on the Discovery Channel. But I ran into him in Manhattan at a bar one day, or one night, and I went up to him and talked to him, and I just said, hey man, I'm starting a podcast. I love your podcast. I'm looking up to people like you as role models for me. And I just kind of want to fast track my success as much as I can, to the extent that I can, by learning from other people and mistakes that they've made. And he said something that really hit me. He said, oh, mistakes. We've had many. And that hit me. And I'm thinking to myself, here's Mike Rowe. He's got tons of followers and fans and huge success. But I never thought about what it took for him to get there. And so after that, he shared some of the stuff that he went through and the mistakes that they made and the roadblocks that they had. And so I decided to write a blog post called The Journey is Invisible. And it talks about the fact that you see successful people, but you don't see the journey. And so I think more successful people need to start sharing their stories, what they're made of, so to speak, and how they got to where they are, so that people, the regular, everyday people that aren't there yet, when they run into a roadblock or a hurdle for their goal, they know that that's just that. It's not the end of the road.
And that's very true. I mean, that's why I asked the first question that I asked you on this podcast is we have a lot of people who are multimillionaires, and we start with their journey. And more often than not, they don't come from wealth. They come from middle class or lower middle class families, and they struggle and they had setbacks. And that's why I always like to share that hero's journey, because we all have them. Everyone has got stuff that's there. And too often I think we look at people and we go, oh, he was an overnight success. And I can tell you from talking to all the overnight successes, every single one of them has at least 10 years of struggle behind them, 10 years of screwing up, 10 years of making mistakes. And so that's a big part. Like I always share my failures with building wealth and all of the stupid mistakes I've made and I continue to make. So I think we have to learn that failure is okay. And I think you kind of almost mentioned it. You know, you just take action immediately, even though you don't have all of the right answers, and you experiment. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Just make sure you don't do something that's going to totally blow you up. Take small bets that constantly work. And then that will help to kind of bring you about and do that. So you mentioned a little bit about culture, and you have a team of people. How do you build culture and how do you maintain it?
All right, so I'm going to tell you a short story long. No, I'll keep it short. We had a mortgage company that we used to work at for 12 years. I was there. Started out as a loan officer and built a team. And we started off in like a cube farm where we had like kind of telemarketer loan officers doing mostly refinances. And we had a good culture at that moment. We were doing big checks, like for commissions at the end of the month. We'd get a big check, like they won the lottery, the top salesperson, and give awards out. We kept a leaderboard, and it was great for years. And for some reason, and I don't know what happened, the ownership didn't press forward with it. And I'm going to take full responsibility that I didn't. And this is my fault for lack of data and lack of knowledge on the topic of culture and how important it is. I let it fall too. I didn't push for the issue either. So. But from that point on, 2008 hit in the mortgage business, things died down. A lot of people that couldn't get licensed fell out of the business, so we lost a lot of our employees. And then after that, we decided to create a division, my partner and I. We had several branches, and we did okay. We did some volume. We made good money, but we were adding people, anybody that we could get a hold of that could produce. We didn't care if they had a good attitude. We didn't even care. We didn't like really know any better. I guess that's the reason I can look back on. And we did well for a while. And for approximately, I would say 11 to 6-7 years, we did well. But I have a quote that I just put out recently that is, no matter how good you're doing at that moment, if you do not have a good culture at your foundation, you will not be around long. So you will have success without good culture, but it will come crumbling down, because what happens is the people in your organization will become me people. They'll look out and think people are trying to screw them. And not only that, when they come across a crucial decision to make, good or bad, they will make the wrong decision. And eventually your organization will start crumbling around you, one at a time or in mass quantities. So we experienced that. The owner of the company that we have started skimming, and things came out, missing, and we had to make a move. So I picked up 22 employees, 3 branches, and moved them to Nations Lending. Great culture company. I vetted a whole bunch of companies prior. But at that moment, I said, listen, we're not doing this. I told my partners, we're not doing this unless we start right now and we develop a culture. And I learned my lesson. And so from that moment on, we started a culture. And there's 4 things. I'm going to tell you 4 steps to creating a culture that we used. And I'm only speaking from experience, and we're blowing up because of it. The first and foremost is gratitude. We have sales meetings once a week, and that's with the whole company, not just a sales meeting every day like we do with the loan officers. But our sales meeting starts off with a gratitude moment, and everybody goes around and they say a person's name from the week prior that they went out of their way or they did something and what they did and that they're thankful for them. And we went around, we go around the group. There's 30-some employees that we do this with. Nobody's allowed to repeat the same topic. That takes time out of our day. It takes time out of our sales meeting, but the gratitude is important to the point where I thought it was kind of corny when I first implemented it. And I was kind of thinking, it's kind of like Thanksgiving. The timing's perfect on this, but it's kind of like Thanksgiving where you go around the table and everybody says what they're thankful for and the kids get annoyed by it. And I just didn't know how it was going to come off, but I implemented it. I went ahead with it anyway. And the following week, the employees were thanking me for implementing that into the mix. So that hit home with me. And I'm like, okay, now we got something. So now our processors who used to have animosity towards the loan officers, the producers, because they would make the money and the processors did a lot of the paperwork and felt like they did most of the work, the animosity started to disappear because the loan officers were showing appreciation for what the processors were doing. And so that's gratitude's number 1. Number 2, we had established a vision for the company and make it big, like gigantuous. Like we get so excited and we create hope. We're so excited to come to work every day. So no matter how hard the work gets, how many stressful roadblock, anything that comes along, we're still excited to come to work. And no matter how good it gets, our grand vision and goal is so big that no matter how good things are going, we're still reaching and stretching. So that's number 2. And then I already mentioned, we create short wins, short targets to have some quick wins to build confidence. Number 3, Rocky, is unlimited income potential for everyone in the organization. And what I mean by that, in sales in general, you have unlimited income potential. You can sell as much as you want and you make as much as you want on those sales. And if you don't make enough in that company, you can go somewhere else in a sales job and make as much as you want. But for support staff, processors and admin and all that, they're on a salary, maybe a file bonus. They're not on unlimited income in most companies. We changed the ballgame with that. We encouraged everyone in our organization to get licensed as a loan officer. They still do their regular job. But every time they're on the phone with someone or they're out in public or they're talking to their family, they're always ending a conversation by asking for business and just reminding the people that what they do for a living. And by doing this, we have created a situation where nobody can be upset, have any animosity about the income that they're making because they control it all. It's 100% responsibility environment. They control it. So we don't have the talks where, hey, I need to make more money. I'm not making enough money. If that comes up, we say, okay, what can we do to get you there? What aren't you doing to bring business in the door? And the revenue that comes in pays for their salary. So we've gotten $1 million, $2 million a month in loan volume, which can pay for the support staff's salaries. That helps the business, obviously, but it also helps the support staff. Their attitude and their family's life has totally changed because financially, because I had one processor the other day made $11,000 in a month on top of her regular pay. That's huge, huge, huge money to them, life-changing money to some of these people. And so when we create that environment, that culture is untouchable. And number 4, we have a strict accountability standards. We set our goals, we set our expectations, and then everybody holds each other accountable. I hold them accountable. We have stats, graphs, leaderboards. If it matters, measure it. We use Power BI, and we just look at everything every day, sometimes hourly. And we hold people accountable to what we expect and what they've expected themselves. And we're not shying away from it. So we're 2 things, Rocky. We push people to greatness or we push them out of our company. Those are the only two options that we live by. And that has created a great culture because I told everybody from the start when we went over to this new company at Nations Lending, I said, listen, guys, I'm going to do this with or without you. And I'll start by myself if I have to because I know what it's going to take. And I'll show you how it's done. But if you're not willing to do it, I'll do it first. And we've come to know that as rooftop leadership. Scott Mann is a motivational speaker, and he's a former Green Beret that went to Afghanistan and fought with villagers against the Taliban. And he talks about rooftop leadership, and I did a blog on this. Rooftop leadership is when you go out and you go do it first. You go up to the roof and fight. You take your hits, you take your wins, and then you come back at the end of the day, and then you go back up the next day, and you keep doing it. And the villagers watch you, and they keep watching. And eventually, one by one, they start coming up to the roof and fighting with you. And that is how we approach it. I didn't even know about rooftop leadership at that moment. That's just something that happened, and it worked. And so now everybody in our organization knows what they expect. They're being held accountable. They hold each other accountable. We have a thing called man up or woman up, and we each hold each other accountable despite our position in the company. So those are the 4 areas that really made a difference for us. And in our business this year, this November will be the 6th record-setting month in our organization's history. And records aren't supposed to be broken that often.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Today's episode of Richer Soul is brought to you by Profit Comes First. Most business owners focus on top-line revenue, and while that's important, the bottom line, what you take home and what's available to reinvest in the business, is what drives continued long-term success. Hundreds of thousands of companies are using Profit First in their business. You don't have to learn fancy accounting systems or how to read complicated financial statements. You just implement the system and behave much like you currently do. However, you pay yourself first. As a certified Profit First professional, I help entrepreneurs and small business owners to grow their business profitably. Through my coaching and consulting, we ensure your business is on track, and I'm making sure that you keep spending in line, increasing your profitability. Learn more at profitcomesfirst.com or click on the scheduling link in the show notes to book a no-obligation call to see how Profit First can help put more money in your pocket. So I have a question, because this is a struggle. How do you know when it's enough?
Clarify. How do you know when what's enough?
I see people constantly chasing up the mountain for more and more and more and more. At what point do you say enough?
I think when you die, that's the way we operate, because here's the thing. I always want to go to the next level and keep stretching. And every time I found that I don't do that, I start to feel something's wrong inside. I start to get in a funk. And so what I've changed now, and with this whole thing is we got to keep reaching and stretching. That's something that goes if you remember Bob Ross, the painter that used to be on public television, and he would start with a blank canvas. He had an afro, and he would paint a picture. We try to paint the picture, and we use illustrations a lot here. And we want to paint the picture, stretch and reach, because if you don't do that, you clam up, you shrivel up, and you die. And that's very important. Any business that I've ever been involved with, we're always trying to grow it. Always trying, because if you try to stay status quo, there's too many things that happen in the economy. There's too many things that happen in families and just out in the world in general that can pull you back. And before you know it, you're not right where you were, where you say that's enough, we can stay right here at this level. You start shrinking. And so we have to get around that. We have to get around those factors. We cannot be in a situation where we're controlled by outside factors. So that's another phrase we use all the time, is create our own economy. We don't want to rely on the economy. We don't want to rely on the interest rates. We don't want to rely on realtors sending us business. We want to create our own economy and do enough activity that we overcome all of that. So to answer your question, I don't know that there's ever a time that there's enough. I'm just not going to ever operate that way. And then my organization that I'm involved with will never operate that way.
And that's fine. You've at least thought through it. Some people don't think through things, and they don't know where their limits are and what they want to do. And so that's cool. I noticed you said something. You don't build businesses, you build people. What does that mean?
So the building of the business is a after effect of building people. And so part of the things that we talked about with culture is you build people through culture. You build people by giving them an opportunity to either be great or leave your company for a better opportunity for them, which ends up being better for the company. And anytime that people are dealing with any issues, personal, financial, these issues become your problem as a business owner or an operator. So we understand that. We don't just say, hey, that's their problem, they'll deal with it, hash it out. We're here for them. And if somebody has to go somewhere and take care of something personal, we're all in a situation where we operate, where we just kind of move into that position and take care of it and pick up the slack. And we all understand that. And we never take our employees time away from them if they need to go to their kid's ball game, or they have in the middle of the day, they have a school thing. All they got to do is say something to us. And we say, listen, we just want the job done. So we're not going to count hours. We're not going to look at minutes. We're not going to get the job done and take care of your family. So those little things that we do with that creates people see how much you care about them as people. You care about their family, and you're building them up. And when you do that, they'll run through walls for you.
That is very true. And I know you kind of come from this from a sales perspective. And I know a lot of people don't want to be salesperson, but at the end of the day, we are all salespeople. You've got to get your idea, your story, and your message out there for who you want to be. You talk about kind of three things being tightly connected: sales, motivation, and inspiration. Can you expand upon that?
Yes, sure. So first of all, sales is just trying to get what you want and solving a problem. So sales has a bad connotation in some aspects because there's a lot of bad salespeople out there. And that's another mission that I'd like to get on, is try to fix that. But as far as motivation, inspiration, and sales is just like a competition in a way. You need inspiration to motivate you to be able to sell. And if you don't have that, you won't sell. So, I always talk about three reasons salespeople don't sell. And I try to break things down being really simple. And one of my mentors back in the day, and back in the 90s, doesn't seem like that long ago, he said there are three reasons salespeople get in a funk and don't sell. They're not working, their attitude or their motivation is messed up, or three, they're off the program that they're supposed to be on for whatever industry that they're in. Those are the only three reasons that salespeople would not be able to sell and hit numbers. And so he always said, go back and look at those three things. And one of them, or a combination of all of them, would be messed up. So part of that, one of those legs, is motivation or attitude or inspiration. And that's one of the three, just to keep it simple and break it down simple, one of the three pillars that we always use to get out of funks or to analyze people's sales numbers. So that's how they're linked up. And then again, I use the stories for the inspiration to keep going back and using it. It's unlimited. Your story, Rocky, from the past, or events that you've been through in the past, and I have many. I just shared one of them with you. They're unlimited. Unlimited. It's not like a limited ration. It's unlimited access to inspiration and motivation from those past stories.
And that's very true. We just had another guest on whose book was Sell Like Jesus. And she kind of shared the same thing. When you look through how Jesus sold, he sold through stories. And she's also same kind of pattern as you. Sales is about helping people solve their problems. It's not about jamming things down their throat. And so it's about doing things appropriately. And so I, too, am also trying to help people understand that, because if you don't speak up for yourself and what your dreams and your aspirations are, if you don't even know what they are and you don't ask for them, it's going to be very hard for you to achieve them. And so you need to be crystal clear. What's your purpose? What do you want? How are you going to get there? And then put the plan together. And when you tell the universe what you want, and you start doing the work to make it happen, then it becomes reality.
That's it. You just laid it all out. Again, keep it simple.
It's simple, but it's hard. You got to show up and do the work. And work's a 4-letter word. But I think people don't have. So it all starts with the reason that they're doing it, right? And the reason people don't work is the reason and is not big enough or not clear. So there's got to be clarity there, and then they have to commit to it.
And if they commit to it and they're clear on what they're looking for as far as their reason or their why, some people call it, work is not work at that point. It doesn't feel like work. You're more focused on your goal, your clear goal, and not focused on the work that you're doing. But when you don't have that, and then you're working and you're just kind of going all over the place and being busy, of course it feels like work. It feels hard, and it's not a good place to be.
It's not. I spent a long time in corporate, so I get that. Now I have the freedom to do what I want, and I work more, and it doesn't feel like work anymore. It's fun. I enjoy what I do, and it's exciting to wake up every day and just take the next step and do what I love.
Rocky, do you ever feel when you get to that point, because I'm in this and I just want to ask you a question here. Do you ever get to the point where you feel like guilty sometimes because you love what you do so much, you don't really feel like you're working, but you are producing fantastically, if that's a word? Do you ever feel like a feeling like, man, I used to work and now I'm accomplishing more and I'm producing, but I don't feel like it works. So I kind of feel like and I get this sometimes, me just personally sharing my heart with you. Sometimes I feel like, man, am I doing enough, or am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing here?
So there's a couple things that are in there. One is imposter syndrome. How am I making all this money for doing so little? Like, how did I get so lucky? And I think that is one of the things that's out there. I don't feel guilty. Because I did a ton of work to get here, and I'm still doing a ton of work to stay here. I think there's always the fear of losing, which I think we all have. Hey, I've gotten to this part of the mountain. What if it all falls apart? You know, what if I have to start over? So, you know, I think it's all of those things kind of mixed together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And whether you feel guilty or not, you always have to have this conversation comes up in your mind. I think every entrepreneur, everybody that's been through a journey, it's got to come up in their mind at some point when they find something that they enjoy doing and it's very productive and they're making money and they're helping people. It's got to come up in their, hey man, I get to go to the golf course today because I make money today. I love golf. I make money doing this because of the people that I'm around, but I love golf and I'm having a great time. Wait a minute here. And from the outside, people look at it and say, oh, well, he's golfing all the time. So that's the kind of stuff that you have these conversations in your head. And this goes back to the old, when I told you about you have an idea and the friends or people around you start saying limiting things or negative things. So that's the kind of like one of the battles that I have in my head sometimes. And I have to say, you know what? They don't know what they're talking about. I got this. And it's productive. So I just wanted to bring that up because I know I can't be the only one with that as well. That conversation goes on sometimes.
You're not, but the reason you have success is because you did the hard work to get where you are today. If you're not willing to do the hard work to get where you are, then it's not going to happen. So I lift. I do heavy lifting. And when I go lift now, it's easy. I don't feel like it's hard work. But when I started, that empty bar was scary as crap, and it was hard work. But when you keep doing the hard work, it becomes easy. And so maybe that's what you're kind of feeling is the work has now become easier because you've honed your skill to the level and you've gone through all the mistakes and all the problems that you know how to do something quickly and easily. Same thing. We flip houses and have some rentals. I can walk into a house today. Within 20 minutes, I can stroke a check and say, let's buy this place. But it's because we made mistakes. It's because we showed up. It's because we kept going. It's because we keep trying that it becomes easy now to do those things. And maybe that's kind of an explanation of what you're feeling. Now that you've done the work, it's easy for everyone looking in. They're like, he doesn't do anything. Actually, he does a lot. And so it's that accumulated knowledge, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when you did a great job, by the way, painting the picture there, Bob Ross, with the weightlifting. Yeah, you're in shape now. That's a great analogy. You're in shape. And that's why lifting's easier. You still press yourself, try to add weight, and you might be sore the next day, but it's nowhere near the fear or the feeling after that first couple workouts. So you're in shape. Yeah, that's a great analogy, Rocky. I like that.
And there's a story, and I don't know if it's Picasso. It's one of the famous painters. Somebody came up to him and said, "Will you paint a painting for me?" And he took out a napkin and he quickly drew a painting for them and handed it to him and said, $50,000. And they freaked out and they said, "It took you 1 minute to do that. How can you charge me $50,000? He said, "It took me 50,000 hours to be able to do it in a minute."
That's right. That's right. Yep.
And so it's that same thing. And I think when you hit that level in the beginning, it's like you forget the work, right? You forget the negatives. That's why. So this is why I think, the story goes, if you go buy a new BMW today, a year from now or 2 years from now, you're not going to love the car anymore. It's a depreciating asset. It gets dinged and it's got problems and you look at it. But if you go to a great vacation somewhere, 3 years from now, that greatness kind of grows, right? You don't remember all the problems along the way of that vacation. You just remember the good parts of it. And that story continues to grow and grow and grow and get better and better and better. And I think it's the same thing in work. You forget all the struggles. You forget how hard it was in that moment. And you forget what it took you to get here. And everyone else it's where we started this story, right? You said people don't look at all the work that people put in to get where they are.
Yep. Right on.
And so we've come back to that. And that's what you like to talk about, right? Use your past experiences, good or bad, and use them to your advantage so that you can improve and build upon it. So what's the big picture? You're doing What Are You Made Of? What's that massive big vision for you?
Well, see, here's the first thing. I started this out back in 2017. I was talking to my team and I was, doing sales training and motivation and talking them up. And I thought to myself, I had this itch. I said, I got to get this out. I got to get this, I can't be just limited to this company. And we can grow the company and all that, but I got to get it out. So I started looking into podcasts. I started looking into social media and just being all over the place. And I said, this is going to help our company. And so then I started thinking to myself, I don't want to just limit it to mortgage or real estate. I want to get it out to everyone. And also what that does, Rocky, I refer to a phrase, creating your own economy. And so one way to create your own economy is to be known by everyone. And that way you're not relying on one source of business for realtors or just past customers, whatever the case is. Everyone is a prospect for you. So, but if you do it in a way that you're helping people along the way and inspiring people, and then the business just follows after that, that's my grand vision with this. And at some point, I'm going to create a digital platform. I'm in the process of that right now. My book. I just want to try to reach, my grand goal when I wrote this down is to reach 10 million people with this message. And I know not all 10 million people are going to take hold to it, but I got to do 10 million so that it reaches a million and 8 million people take hold. And then we try to get this movement of what are you made of going all over the world.
And so I think there's an important distinction in there that people need to realize. You're batting 1 out of 10, which is an average. Isn't that great? But that's just the reality of life. We've got to get up and do 10 things to have one massive success. And you can't say, oh, I tried 3 times and I failed. I'm giving up. You have to keep doing the work. And I think that's something that we don't tell people. And that's, I think, where your inspiration comes in is, all right, that didn't work. What can you try next? What are you made of? Are you going to stand back up or are you just going to fall down and give up on this journey? Because you got to keep going.
Exactly right. Stop making excuses, take 100% responsibility and figure it out. And if you're committed to something, you do. And that's what it's all about. And I want to be able to I want to hear people's stories. I'm going to take them actually. And again, we like to be intentional rather than and proactive rather than reaction mode. So what we've done, and I want to do this personally, is every employee that we have, that's another exercise I didn't mention yet that we're doing in our sales meeting. We're having one employee each week share their story. and we're getting to know these people, which we wouldn't have done before. And then I'm taking intentional action on people that I run into and talk to and asking them that share their story with me. Everybody's got a story. What's your story? That's my pickup line. Now I'm married. I'm not talking about picking up women, but that's my pickup line or networking line. When I talk to someone now, hey man, everybody's got a story. What's your story? And that's how I start the conversation. And since I've been doing that, Rocky, with that intentional action, you wouldn't believe some of the stories that I've heard that I would never have heard before. It's just, it blows me away. And I want to share that with people and man, teach people how to do that. Can you imagine if people go to networking events and they have a line to say that actually works and it gets the people talking about themselves? Everybody loves talking about themselves. Let's face it. Gets them talking about themselves, shares a story, and you can learn a lot, one, to help in your life, but you get to know that person. And that's what interpersonal interaction is all about, is getting to know that person. So me personally, I'm going to take that intentional action. Everybody I talk to, I'm using that line because I want to learn about them. And I want to share that with everybody. And if people start picking that up and start using that, I want to hear the stories. And I also want to have people on the podcast and have them share their stories to help inspire others. It's not about me sharing my story to reach 10 million people. What I'm going to try to do is I want to reach 10 million people by sharing stories that inspire them.
That's awesome. I'm going to steal your line.
It works, man.
I'm going to try it. I go to a lot of networking events these days. And so I'm going to check it out and give it a try. I'll let you know what stories I hear and how it works.
Looking forward to it.
So you're in the mortgage business. What are you seeing these days in the real estate markets?
Well, right now there's a shortage of properties. We get a lot of home buyers pre-qualified, ready to buy, and we have them sitting in a pipeline. We call it a pipeline, waiting for them to find the right house. And right now there's a lot of people holding on to their properties because they've secured low interest rates. They're fine where they are. A lot of people that have retired are staying put. We're seeing a lot more home building, new construction in certain areas, which is needed, but I don't think the builders can keep up with the inventory shortage. But the thing is that I think at some point here, I think the baby boomers are going to start moving out, and then we're going to have an influx of inventory shortly. And I think that's how the housing cycle works anyway at times. You know, you have a buyer's market, a seller's market, but I think the baby boomers at some point here are going to start moving out. And millennials, they're the number one, by the way, millennials are the number one demographic for our business. But I've seen also on national news, millennials aren't buying as many homes, or as higher percentage of millennials are buying as opposed to the prior generations. But I think also it's because of the shortage of inventory. But interest rates are historically low, and overall, I mean, we're breaking records for our business and loan production, which is crazy.
Well, they got hammered in 2008, didn't they, the millennials?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that bought at certain times, 2005, 2006, and up to that 2008, man. I mean, a lot of them got stuck into foreclosure, short sales, or what have you. And if you can't get a mortgage for a few years after that. So, of course, that could affect the numbers. And
then the other thing is, I think that generation is more interested in the freedom to be able to move and to be able to just go. They tend to be much more mobile than previous generations, I think. And we're becoming a more mobile world as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, something, speaking of that's helped us in our business is actually we have 2 loan processors that work in totally different states, never come to the office, work from home. Everything is web-based now, so that allows us to get the best talent throughout the country, whereas before we were geographically restricted. And not to say anything bad about the areas that we have branches in, but it's a bigger talent pool that we can pick from. And we have actually one employee that works in the Netherlands. So, I mean, just because of that technology that's available to be mobile. So that may be some of it. But you know what? The other thing is that you see a lot of things on the news, Rocky, and I don't know that I always believe that millennials don't want to buy homes and they're mobile. I don't necessarily believe that. I think a lot of it has to do with the inventory shortage.
And that I think is very driven local geography, depending on where you are. And I think depending on your geography, some of them may not be able to afford it because housing prices are that in the hot markets, they don't make economic sense. So I see this from the opposite side where people are like, I'd like to invest in real estate and turn it into a rental. and you go into certain markets, Seattle, New York City, I'm sure California, it's like you can't make money renting this house out.
You can't cash flow.
You can't cash flow. And so if you flip it the other way, you go, well, wait a minute. Why am I buying this house when I could rent it for a fraction of buying it, have zero risk, and I can bolt when I want? So I think the whole idea of home ownership, they're doing more of the numbers. Depending where you are and where you live, you have to look at it and make those choices.
Agreed. I agree with that. Yep. But you know what? When they start to get married and start to have a family, less of them will be happier renting. And I deal with this personally. I'd like the idea of being mobile and renting and bouncing around. There's no way in the world my wife will do that. So, I'm in a situation where, we bought a house, we built a house, and we're going to stay in that house for now because that's where she wants to raise the family. And so there's going to be some of that takes place once some of the millennials start to get married and have families too. So.
And that's very true. And people seem to be moving back to the city. When I was growing up, everyone was moving out of the city into the suburbs. And so there's all these mega trends going on.
And not to mention, Rocky, not to cut you off, but not to mention the student loan debt.
Yes.
There's very tough restrictions on student loan payments that we have to use to qualify borrowers that restrict them in their buying potential or power. So.
And I have seen that with some of my renters, and I've started to, I never used to ask the question before, but now I specifically ask the question. I ask, how much student loan debt do you have? Because when they would fill out the application and you'd ask for their mortgages and loans, they would never put their student debt on there. It didn't dawn on them. Like they would put their car payment on there or their credit card stuff, but they would never put their school loans down. And when I started asking specifically for student loan debt, I started seeing the numbers. I was like, oh my, that's a lot. And I know what their incomes are. So it's like, wow, that's a struggle. And so I think people do need to make those choices better. And we've had episodes on that and talked about being highly intentional with whether or not you should pay for college and how should you go about doing it and making the right choices. Because that's a decision you're making at 18 that if you haven't been properly coached on can have long-lasting repercussions.
Yep. And then some of them don't have payments at all right now. They're in deferment or what have you. We still have to qualify them with a percentage of the balance. And that payment comes due eventually.
It does. And they are not bankruptable. So you're stuck. There's kind of almost no way out of them. Right. So we'll see what happens. Is there anything else that you wanted to share on living a more richer, meaningful life, but didn't get a chance to?
No, I think we covered a lot. And I'll tell you what, Rocky, I have a private Facebook group for your listeners that if they want to go to it, I'll let them into it. So what are you made of? It's where I engage with podcast listeners and I encourage people to share their story on that group to help inspire others to share their stories there as well. It's called What Are You Made Of with Mike C-Roc. It's in Facebook. And also my podcast. Please feel free to subscribe. I'd love to engage with your follower or your listeners and hopefully inspire as many of them as possible with the people that I have on, including myself.
Based on our conversation, what's one action step people can take to move forward this week?
This is a big one, and I'm going through this right now. In the last week or so, I started to feel in a little bit of a funk or something wasn't quite right with me. And you know what I've figured out in the past, and I reminded myself, is at that point, you got to figure out something you need to do in the morning before you get up and really get going, or something needs to put you in an uncomfortable situation. And so what I did for myself, and this may vary by the individual, but I woke up at 4:15, 4:30, which I usually get up at 6:30. And I started getting up at 4:15, 4:30, pushing myself and going to the gym at 5. Got a personal trainer, which I usually do group training. Got a personal trainer. And I told the personal trainer that my goal is to get as uncomfortable as possible. And I want him to put me through pain. And so this is just me now. And it doesn't have to be this workout or what have you. But my action step this week would be figure out 1 or 2 things that would cause you to be uncomfortable and help you stretch and reach into your next level.
And that's a powerful action step.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I've been doing it for 2 weeks now, and it's I haven't felt this good in a long time. I mean, and it actually, created extra time in my day to accomplish some things. I didn't know what to do with myself, actually, Rocky. I was thinking to myself, like, it was like 8 o'clock, and I'm like, I got everything done. What am I supposed to do now? So, it's just got to go to bed a little earlier. And this particular action that I've taken, you go to bed at 9, and you don't watch as much stupid TV that's filling your brain with garbage anyway.
Absolutely. And if you get your hardest stuff done first thing in the morning, the rest of the day is a piece of cake.
Exactly. So that's what I would recommend people do, and I would love to hear feedback on that.
Well, and that's what I try. I always try and do my hardest stuff first, and then that way it's done. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
My secret to living an abundant life, Rocky, is having huge, massive goals and reminding myself of them every single day, 2-3 times a day if I have to. It's unreasonable, but you said abundant. I'm looking for unreasonable results.
And that's where abundance is. And throughout this episode, you've always kept to that level. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I talked about culture when I was younger at 11. I really didn't know how to label it at that time, and I didn't know how to describe it. But I wish I would have known exactly what that was all about earlier on in my career, so that we didn't have the situation at the first mortgage company that we were in. And we didn't wait until I was 40-some years old to really focus and establish a great foundation with a great culture.
And culture is everything. We just had an episode called Culture Beats Strategy. So if you haven't heard that one, go back and listen. It's digging more into this whole idea of building the right culture. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Work on themselves first. Get them in a financial situation that's stable and has growth potential first before they start chasing the opposite sex. That's a new one that I've come up with recently, because you know what? A lot of our problems when we were younger stemmed from chasing the opposite sex, whether it was going to parties or doing dumb things, spending money. I want to really encourage younger kids, the younger generations, to get yourself first straight. You got to worry about yourself. You got to put your mask on first before you can help others. And that's one message that I'm really starting to work on and getting out as well.
And that's very true. When you build that strong foundation, everything else becomes easier. It's one of those timeless pieces of wisdoms that apply to a multitude areas of life. If people would like to find you, connect, find your book, your podcast, what's the best place for them to go and to do that?
One of the things I take pride with, Rocky, is being all over the place. So I'm all over social media, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find me anywhere. Google my name. However, I have a website, the Mike C-Roc without a K, C-R-O-C, themikecroc.com. I put my blog and the podcast there, as well as all podcast platforms. You can find the What Are You Made Of with Mike C-Roc podcast. So really easy to find and reach out to. And I encourage your listeners to reach out and engage with me.
And I will ensure that I put that in the show notes as well, so it makes it easy for them to do so. Thank you so much for this inspiring conversation today.
Well, you're quite welcome. And I really appreciate you having me on, Rocky. I enjoyed talking to you today.
As did I. Have a great day.
You too, bud.
What roadblocks are holding you back, and how can you use them to fuel your growth? We all have our own unique journey and struggles, and most of the time, there are a lot of bumps on the path to success. The more you share your vulnerability and struggles, the more you will learn from others. Too often, we go through life missing out on those deeper conversations that lead to growth. This week's action step: do something that will make you uncomfortable. For Mike, it was getting to the gym early. What about you? What will you try? Post what you're going to do on the Facebook page under this episode. For me, Toastmasters has been something that I put off for years, and I'm finally doing. I get uncomfortable to have to walk up in front of a room, handle an impromptu prompt, and speak for 2 minutes, but I'm starting to enjoy it. In a company, creating culture takes work and vision. Either you create the culture or someone else will. It's definitely not a step you can skip. And that was another point that Mike brought up today that I think is important. If you're still listening, you must have liked the episode. So please share it with a few friends. It can start a great conversation. I would appreciate that. You can also connect with me on Facebook. There's both a Facebook page and group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can always get me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.